Yeah. You guys can hear me? Make sure you guys can hear me. Let me know. Wow, 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 wow. Yeah. Wow, wow. Let me know when you guys are in. About to read this book. All right. Make sure you guys can hear me. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Wow, wow. Yeah. Come through, come through, come through, come through. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Blessings. Blessings. Wow. You guys can hear me? Yeah, good. I got a wireless mic. I want to make sure you guys can hear me loud and clear. Okay. And the it looks good. The connection. I want to make sure the connection is not blurry. All that. I mean, as long as you guys can hear me, it's better. But all right. Good. We good. We good. Cheers. Yeah. Yes, sir. That's what's up. Okay. Okay, that's what's up. I look great. Thank you. Crystal clear. That's what I'm talking about. So we're gonna get back in this book, guys. I brought it on my vacation so I can read to you because we are in the Caribbean, and this involves a lot of Jamaica too. You know, like a lot of the Sephardic Jews. This was a haven for the Sephardic Jews and the Moors and stuff. So you know, we're gonna get back into this book. We've read 2 chapters already, and live just like this. This is we're gonna read chapter 3 today. The book is The Jews in the Caribbean by Jane S. Gerber. All right, you guys take a look. Make sure to like and share, guys. We're gonna get into the whole history. All right. I can't really read the comments while you guys are here, but we're gonna get started right away, right? We ain't waste no time, man. Make sure to like and share. Welcome. Come through. Yeah. Make sure you guys can hear me. Yeah. Test. 1 2 1 2. Yeah, we good, huh? This is awesome. I bought a little wireless mic just for this, just so I can read to you on my vacation. All right. Love and peace. Love and peace. My first live. Hey, welcome. We're gonna read a book. Okay, we're gonna read a chapter 3 of this book. We read the previous 2 chapters already. All right. We got some drop. We got a lot of drop actually. So I bought this specifically. I brought it with me to Jamaica so I can be able to do a live with you guys. I gotta look at the camera right there. I be forgetting to look at the camera. That's what's up. You're here for the knowledge. Okay. So right away, guys. Okay. Just like when I was telling you guys about the Rasta elder the other day. If you saw my blog, if you guys haven't seen my blogs, my vacation blogs here in Jamaica, make sure to check them out. Ran into a Rasta in the craft market, and he was telling me about Marcus Garvey and Selassie and all that other stuff, right? So I kind of had to drop a little seed on him. I turned the camera off so I can have a heart to heart with him. And we were talking about the Sephardic Jewish Moorish history that he had in him too, along with the Arawak, the Taino, the Carib. I mean, you can see it in his eyes. Like I can see it. I know. You know what I mean? I was trying to tell him, drop the knowledge. He was like, he was just nodding his head, like. But then he came back with the Africa stuff. You know what I mean? And he started calling me the white man. Believe it or not, yeah, it's all good. And he started calling himself the black man and crayon color stuff. And I was like, dude, I don't really do that. So I don't really talk about crayon colors, right? I'm just lean back. All right. So what I'm trying to say is that Jamaica has a lot of Sephardic Jewish ancestry, a lot of Muslim Moors too, right? Like these people were being persecuted in Spain and Portugal, right? And a lot of them ended up in Jamaica. The Huguenots as well. There's a lot of French influence involved with Jamaica. Even the word patois, that's French, guys, right? So when we talk about the pirates and the buccaneers and all that pirate history in Jamaica, as we've learned before, that has to do with the Sephardic Jews and the Moors. They were, in general, a lot of the crypto Jews. They were the pirates. That's why they were raiding certain ships, it was the Catholic ships they were raiding. And when they were raiding certain places, there was the Catholic colonies, right? Because they were getting back at them. They had a grudge against them. They had been kicked out. They were being murdered by them, persecuted by the Catholics. So too much Korean corruption. All right. So we're gonna read a book today, right, guys? We're gonna read chapter 3 of this book. Hopefully the battery don't die. Hopefully the internet don't die. Hopefully the mic don't die. If the mic dies, we'll just talk without the mic, right? It's just because I got my nephew here and people making noise, so I got the mic working, right? So what we're gonna read again is "The Jews in the Caribbean" by Jane Gerber. We're in chapter 3. We're gonna get started right away. Remember, when we're talking about these Sephardic people, so-called Jews, don't think white man, guys. The Rastaman said, "Oh yeah, these are so-called Jews." I was like, "Listen, they're more Hebrew than the fake Jews of today, the Chazars, right? The ones they call themselves Jews, right? But when we talk about Sephardic Jews, guys, we're talking about black folks in general. We're talking about melanated people. I want you guys to understand that before I start reading, okay? I want you guys to understand that. Yeah, hey guys, I just came back from the beach. You guys saw the life. I'm like literally getting my copper colored. I'm literally getting my copper colored back in Jamaica. Yeah, it's a blessing. Everything's a blessing, man. Yeah, yeah, man. Yeah, man. All right, in a yard town, you know. All right, we're gonna learn about some of the history, right? So what we're gonna read is chapter 3. Hopefully, you guys can hear me good. It says to live and to trade. The status of Sephardic mercantile communities in the Atlantic world during the 17th and 18th centuries. So that's in the 1600s and 1700s. Okay. Oh, wow. Welcome, welcome. It says here introduction by Noah L. Gelfand. So each chapter is like a different article from different people, right? And it says here Jews occupied an unusual place in the social, political, and legal realm of the early modern Atlantic world. So when we're talking about Jews in this case, and they're talking about Sephardic guys, remember, we're not talking about today's so-called Jews. We've broken this down. We're not talking about Ashkenazi. We're talking about the Sephardic people. These are so-called black folks, melanated people. All right, I want to just say that a lot of times so you guys not confused. Okay, understand, overstand, understand. All right, just like the Rastas say, right? So they played in a crucial. They had an unusual place in the social, political, and legal realm of the early modern Atlantic world. These are black folks, guys. They were valued for the economic connections and cultural skills they possessed, but ironically, they were often also despised for these same qualities. Their minority status in the Christian world, right, the so called Christian or Catholics, made them easy targets of scorn and subject to regulatory policies. While some individual Jewish merchants, right, who's the merchants? We went over there. Who's the real merchants? These were black folks, right, guys? Like Aaron Lopez. I am from the Caribbean. That's what's up, Poison. Welcome to my channel. If you're new to my channel, if you've never seen me do the readings, we're gonna learn about the Sephardic Jews. It's a very important history that they leave out of, the curriculums when we're learning about, you know, the role black folks played in history. We that have been whitewashed. Okay, these people have been whitewashed in history. These were black folks, guys, in general, especially understand in the 1600s and 1700s. That's what this chapter is talking about. Okay, don't think Ashkenazis. Okay, that's a different people. That's later on. Because while some individual Jewish merchants like Aaron Lopez of 18th century Newport, Rhode Island, achieved wealth and respect as a group, Jews never gained full equality with Christians or Catholics in the places they lived, remaining on the social and political margins. They were marginalized. That's what I'm trying to explain to you guys. They were black folks. They were being disfranchised, marginalized. Okay. See, it don't make sense when we think all these people are white and all the same people. You gotta empty your cup. Come in with the ready to learn, guys. Okay. Cheers. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, Jews were a people within and without the Atlantic world, an economic ally, important group who nevertheless had to negotiate and then reaffirm specific privileges and rights to conduct business and practice their religion. Yeah, very swarthy, exactly. The Portuguese and Spanish so called Jews, Hebrew people. This is what we're talking about right now, okay? We're not talking about what you see today in the news or modern world, Ashkenazi. Again, we're not talking about them, all right? It says one of the central reasons Jews occupied a space on the political margins of the early modern Atlantic world was their status as an alien population. Europeans and colonial Americans considered Jews to be members of a separate nation. Pay attention. These are melanated folks, guys. Okay? They were marginalized, they were being separated, right? While Sephardi Jews identified themselves as belonging to the Portuguese Jewish nation, listen, or Hebrew nation. That's what it says. Hebrew nation. Okay? And it says there's a thumbnail, a thumb footnote for that, right? So they consider themselves Portuguese. What do we know about the Portuguese Jews? We've shown the sources. And there was a general consensus. And I got a video coming when I get back to Costa Rica about what the Jews were being described like in general in Europe, right? Especially the Portuguese Jews, so called Jews, Hebrew people, they were very swarthy, very dark skinned, so called black, okay? So they consider themselves what? Portuguese Jewish nation or a Hebrew nation. A diaspora people, diaspora, right? There's all the African diaspora. Diaspora, they were being sent out of their country, murdered, crucified, burned at the stake, all that, guys. Hanged. These were black folks, guys. I'm trying to tell you, all right? A diaspora people, Jews were without a homeland of their own, and constituted a nation within a nation wherever they lived. Because of this and their inability to conform to the dominant religious culture of the societies in which they resided, they were subject to legal, social, and religious restrictions. Moreover, as aliens, they faced disabilities in commercial endeavors, including higher duties and taxes, and were occasionally prohibited from participating in some trades at all. All right? Listen, while the restrictions and impediments Jews face, so called Jews, right? Hebrew people, right? Face could be discouraging. Most were not insurmountable. Sephardic Jews succeeded in forming communities in numerous locations in the Atlantic world during the early modern era. Indeed, historian Jonathan Israel has demonstrated that Sephardic Jews had the greatest geographical reach of any of the trading diasporas of the period. And this is the stuff we've gone over, guys. Like they had connections everywhere. They held down the whole trade. They were the ship owners. They were the owners of all the ports, right? When it came to trade in these times, 1600s, 1700s, it was black folks in general, Sephardic Jews, right? Holding everything down, bringing the sugar plantations, everything. These were black folks, guys, not the white man. All right. I'm going to say that many times today. All right. As you guys listen. Indeed, historian John. Okay, we got that. They got the greatest geographical reach of any trading diaspora of the period. The fact that as the 17th century progressed, they were able to establish settlements in Dutch, so-called Dutch, English, so-called English, right? And until 1685, French colonies was very important to their overall success. Why do I say so-called Dutch and so-called English, right? Who are the Dutch? Who are the Black Dutch? Remember that these same Sephardic Jews and Moors, Moorish Muslims, I'm not mean just more as Black European, I mean the Muslims, after they got persecuted during the Inquisition, they left Spain and Portugal and settled in Amsterdam, many of them. And that became the New Jerusalem. Amsterdam was called the New Jerusalem. They had a stronghold in Amsterdam. These were your so called Dutch who took over the West India Company, the East India Company. You know, again, melanated folks, guys. A lot of your ancestors, trust me, right? This ties in with Sean Paul. He's from Jamaica, right? We're gonna do his ancestry, but a lot of videos are going out there about his ancestry. You're gonna see Portuguese Jews, but people think white. People think white. These were melanated folks, right? And I'm gonna show you Devon House. Devon House in Jamaica, right? If you guys know, if you're Jamaican, you know Devon House, that was owned by a Sephardic Jewish family. These were black folks, rich, millionaire, trade merchants. Who are we talking about exactly right now? How dare I use the three-letter word? What's he talking about? All right, if you're new to my channel, hey guys, any moderators, if you see anything, give them a little warning. Try to tell them, hey, if they continue, you can time them out, right? I give you full permission. I hope there's moderators in the house right now. Okay. So again, guys, this ain't personal. I'm trying to help you. We're not talking about those Jews, Mark. Though, see, that's what you gotta listen, Mark. We're not talking about the Ashkenazi. We're not talking about Ashkenazi right now, guys. We're talking about black melanated folks, Hebrew people, right? Sephardic, not Ashkenazi, Mark. Okay, understand, overstand, understand, right? Okay. So they were so-called Dutch, so-called English. Remember who colonized um, Jamestown, Roanoke Island? They called us English, but they weren't so English. When we see the ancestry of all these people, you gotta understand, right? Please understand. That's why I gotta mention it. 'Cause a lot of people are gonna come in while I'm reading, guys. They're gonna come in late, guys. We're talking about black folks. In this case, when we're talking about Jews in the Caribbean, we're talking about 1600s, 1700s. We're not talking about Ashkenazi. We're talking about Sephardic people, crypto Jews, so-called crypto Jews or new Christians. They had converted just to survive. They had converted, called new Christians, conversos, marranos, moriscos. Okay, marranos, moreno, marrano. Okay, we're not talking about falashas, guys. Stay on topic. Okay, try to stay on topic, guys. That's a whole different thing. Check out my Africans Not of Africa playlist for that. If you want to talk about, remember that there's a lot of people that come out of Abraham. Not all of them are Isaac's sons. Not all of them are Jacob's sons. Okay? Pay attention, please, and stay on topic. We're talking about a specific thing right now, okay? We're talking about who settled the Caribbean, right? So it says their dispersal throughout the Atlantic world meant that they did not owe allegiance to any single European power. Members of the Sephardic diaspora could play upon European rivalries, moving between empires to seek the greatest possible economic and religious concessions, thus helping, at least partially, to mitigate the disabilities they experienced. For Sephardic Jews, the key to gaining economic and religious concessions in the Atlantic world lay in making themselves useful to the European powers. They mean the Catholics. When they say useful to they mean the Catholics. All right. As Jonathan Israel had noted, their skills as cross-cultural brokers and the extent of their connections with new Christian kin, which enabled them to bridge the Protestant-Catholic divide and link the transatlantic seaborne empires of the Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, English, and French, were extremely valuable and unparalleled among the trading diasporas of the era. Ambitious Portuguese Jewish merchants, right? Who's the Portuguese merchants, right? This is what I'm trying to tell you. Very swarthy people, very so-called black, melanated, dark-skinned people. Okay? So ambitious Portuguese Jewish merchants recognized that this usefulness provided them with a degree of leverage with which to negotiate concessions from government agents and company officers, while pragmatic officials understood that allowing Jews certain liberties was in the best interest of their imperial project. So, what are they talking about? They used the so called black Sephardic Moorish people that were the merchants to colonize America. They needed them. They needed these black folks, guys, to colonize America. Don't think the Catholics are all white. Remember who King, remember who Charles V was. Ferdinand, Isabella, these were melanated folks, guys. It wasn't about color back then. It wasn't about color back then. Overstand, understand, understand, okay? Yeah, Christopher Columbus was a Portuguese Jew, guys. Christopher Columbus, his real name was Salvador Fernandez Sarco. That's his real name. He was a Portuguese Jew. He was born in the town of Cuba in Portugal. It was called Cuba. That's why he named the island Cuba. Okay? It had a different name before that. So pay attention to what I'm trying to say. They needed these people, right? They needed these people because they had all the connections. They had all the trade going. They had all the ships. They needed these people. They needed these people. They used them. Once they got established and set up shop, then they ran them out of all these countries in the Americas. The Catholics came and took over everything, and then they had to flee again and go to different places. A lot of these people ended up in the U.S. All right, they ended up and as your ancestors. This is what I'm trying to explain to you guys. All right, so okay, okay. So they used them, and they're providing them with a degree of leverage with which to negotiate concessions from government agents and company officers, while pragmatic officials understood that allowing Jews certain liberties was in the best interest of the imperial projects. Nevertheless, securing charters and privileges to establish Jewish mercantile communities and then maintaining these privileges while enduring opposition and prejudice proved challenging. Prejudice. Key words here to pay attention to. This chapter seeks to explore the privileges and rights that Sephardim were able to acquire in order to establish and maintain mercantile communities in the Caribbean and Southern Atlantic world during the 17th and early 18th century. Again, that's the 1600s and 1700s. It focuses on people who were identified or who identified themselves as Jews or Hebrew people and who had the dual purpose of engaging in transatlantic trade and worshiping openly as Jews. New Christian and crypto Jewish populations in the Portuguese and Spanish Atlantic worlds. People who were critical to Sephardic trade networks, but who did not or could not live as Jews. Okay? A lot of them had to hide their Jewish ancestry or their Hebrew ancestry because of the Catholics. All right? All right, Poison Ivy, you got to catch up on my videos. You're very lost with the whole African thing. You're very lost with the whole African thing. And if you're new to my channel, and if you take anything I say right now personal, then moderators, do what you have to do. You know, if you're here to learn, you're here to learn, right? The whole West African slave trade that was mistold to us. In general, the makeup of many Americans in North America, in the Caribbean, in Central America, South America, is American Indians. Pay attention. Right now, I'm gonna tell you right now, so you don't keep asking me the same thing. American Indians and the black Europeans. All right? The black Europeans, not Africans. These people were being enslaved. Many people were being enslaved and sent to the plantations to the Caribbeans. Irish, Scottish, prisoners of war, the Jacobites, all these people were melanated, guys. They whitewashed history. I hope you understand and catch up to my videos, please. Please. If you're new to my channel, I'm like really begging you, like please. If you have questions, all my answers are in my presentations. You got to catch up to the last 8 years. We've been here 8 years, all right? So let's continue, right? Let's continue. Hopefully I answered you. Hopefully I answered. These silly questions, they're good questions. They might be new people. They might be new people. They're not, yeah, the Indians. So yeah, the Indians were enslaved first, of course. The American Indians were enslaved first. So why you add African? Get rid of that. Like empty your cup. You still add an African. Get rid of that. What African ship? Show me the ships. I've showed the history. If you watch my playlist, The Real Slave Trade, you'll see who was really being enslaved. I showed the primary sources. Numerous, numerous. The numbers add up. Trust me. Yeah, it was American Indians and the black Europeans that were being used as slaves, the indentured servants, the prisoners of war, the convicts. They were being sent to the plantations along with the Indians, not Africans, not like from West Africa, but certain type of Africans that were, some of them were Sephardic or, from North Africa. Some of them got involved, some of them got caught up. A lot of those were the ship owners, though, not the slaves, though. This is what I'm trying to explain to you guys. This is what I'm trying to explain to you guys. A lot of these Sephardic Jews who were melanated folks, were the ship owners, were the plantation owners. Get that color thing out your mind, that it was just white versus black. All right? You're here to learn for true knowledge. Take a deep breath and be ready to learn. Be ready to learn new information. Yes, exactly. Muslim Highlanders from Scotland, Irish, and that's what I'm saying. Montserrat, we got the video on Montserrat. Why do you think they have the biggest St. Patrick's Day parade in Montserrat in the world? Not even in Ireland. All right? Like, we've shown the facts, guys. All right, we've shown the facts. These same bloodlines are in your family. A lot of Sephardic Moorish, a lot of those so-called Irish that are mixing with the Choctaws, that are mixing with the southeastern tribes and whatever, they were Sephardic, they were crypto Jews, guys. I'm trying to tell you, I want you to know yourself truly, man, like for real. All right, empty your cup. You're here to learn, right? I'm trying to help you understand something. So let's continue. Oof, where were we? Where were we? Let's see where we were. So, people who were critical to Sephardic trade networks but who did not or could not live as Jews are therefore not central to my discussion, since Jews were excluded from the French Caribbean after 1685. The French Atlantic is largely peripheral to this study as well. Instead, it focuses on the Dutch and English Caribbean and Southern Atlantic worlds, where Jewish mercantile communities secured the greatest array of charters, privileges, and rights, or were otherwise permitted to practice their religion and engage in commerce during the early modern era. Significantly, within these empires, members of the Sephardic diaspora were best able to assert their identity as Jews. Okay? Cheers. Don't ask me what this is, all right? we're freestyling, okay, as we go. Hey guys, if you're older to my channel and you see people asking questions, try to help me answer and try to like just help them understand things, right? Please, because I can't see all the chats. Okay. And examining Jewish mercantile communities in both the Dutch and English Atlantic worlds, it quickly becomes apparent that there was no coherent policy regarding the Jews in either empire. Rather, privileges and rights were extended on situational basis depending upon the needs of the Dutch and English in their metropolitan centers of their colonial periphery, so-called Dutch, so-called English. So, well, when they separate them from Sephardic Jews, they mean the Catholics. When they're not talking about Sephardic Jews, they mean the Dutch or English. They mean the Catholics. Okay, and it doesn't mean white. Factors such as imperial rivalries, population shortages in the colonies, and perceived commercial advantages from permitting Jewish trade networks to function within their territories all played a role in the privileges Sephardi merchants were able to negotiate for themselves. While the ad hoc nature of these privileges provided opportunities to press for greater concessions in certain circumstances, it also meant that community leaders sometimes had to assert and defend their position when circumstances changed. All right. Make sure you guys stay on topic and stuff. I don't mind you guys talking, but don't get distracted too. Now, continuing, it says the Sephardim in the Atlantic world. Of the story of the Sephardi settlement in the Netherlands, like I was saying, they ended up in Amsterdam and Holland. They literally set up shop. They became the so-called Dutch guys. They became the West India Company, East India Company. They became the so-called Dutch. They had New Jerusalem and Amsterdam. That's what they called it. But these were people from Spain and Portugal, swarthy black folks. They have whitewashed history, guys. So while they created the settlement in the Netherlands, it is by now a familiar one, which we know, right? Certain aspects of this history deserve restating as the circumstances have significance for Jewish settlement in the Caribbean, very significant in the Caribbean and in the colonies. Members of the Sephardic diaspora, why they saying diaspora, right? We always think African diaspora, they got kicked out. Inquisition was going after these people, guys. That's why they had to hide themselves and call themselves crypto Jews. Hide, right? So members of the Sephardic diaspora first began arriving in the Netherlands in the 1590s. That's listen, as new Christian merchants, so-called new Christians, meaning converts. They had to convert or die. Remember the history we've gone over. They had to convert or die. So they pretended, a lot of them, to be Christians. That's how you get all your Protestantism, all these Christian sects that are under Catholic, right? Like you got Anabaptist, Methodist, all of them, Presbyterian, Protestantism. A lot of those were Sephardic Jews, guys, because they didn't want to be full Catholics because they were, in reality, Sephardic Jews or Moorish Muslims. That's where that comes from, guys. And why is that in the black communities a lot? This is what I'm. You gotta. I want you to really think. Start thinking logical. Why is that so prevalent in the black communities? Because that's the ancestry. Okay. So settling in Amsterdam, they would have been aware that no Inquisition existed in the Dutch Republic. But beyond that fact, there is no reason to suspect they initially believed they would be able to establish an openly Jewish community there, and which they were able to. Why? They got to understand the whole history we've gone over. It is possible that some of these Portuguese new Christians would have known about Article 13 of the Union of Utrecht, which established general freedom of conscience in the seven United Provinces. Yet Article 13 was specifically designed to prevent the persecution of Catholics and Protestants in the Netherlands, all right? Not to allow the practice of Judaism. As no Jews lived in the Netherlands at that time, they were not even mentioned in the document. Nevertheless, Portuguese new Christians, right, crypto Jews, immigrants to Amsterdam would have noticed that the city was a haven for persecuted Protestants from other European nations and may have sensed the Article 13 tended to inhibit action on the part of the authorities on any subject relating to religion. Again, so Protestants and Sephardic Jews or crypto Jews coming together, they're all going to the same spots where they are able to practice their religion, where Catholics are not. Because again, when you start studying the Protestantism and the background of who these people were before they became so-called Christians and why they don't follow full Catholicism, the idol worship and all that, you start understanding who they really were. And so wherever the Sephardic Jews were, the Protestants were, guys, like the Huguenots, so-called Protestants, right? Thank you for like listening and understanding. And if you don't, please, we've already proven how these people are described. These were black folks. We've already shown the primary sources and Huguenots too. Huguenots, so-called Huguenots, before they became known as Huguenots, again, they were Sephardic Jews and Moors that had fled Spain and Portugal and settled in Lower France and became known as Huguenots. We've shown the sources. We've shown the genealogy. Okay? So let's try to stay on topic, guys. We ain't talking about so-called Olmecs. Like, you guys are on something else. But anyways, okay. So wherever the Protestants were, the so-called Sephardic Jews were too. They were all trying to survive for a reason. There's a reason why they were together, guys. We've gone over this in so many videos before. That's why I want you to catch up if you're new to my channel, so you guys can take the context. Okay, Marlene, thank you. I'm glad they are to you, Marlene. Thank you. So let's see if we can continue. Thus, the overall atmosphere of Amsterdam may have convinced the crypto Jews, secret Jews among the Portuguese new Christians that they could practice Judaism in more obvious ways without negative consequences. The formal practice of Judaism in Amsterdam is believed to have begun around 1602. 1602, guys, we're talking about black folks here. When a rabbi arrived in the city to lead services, by 1612, a second congregation had formed, and its members arranged for Dutch carpenter Hans Gerrits to construct a synagogue on Houtborgwal behind Bridstraat. Amsterdam's Reformed Church complained about the project to the city council. On 8 May of 1612, the city council ruled that the Portuguese were prohibited from practicing their religion in the building on penalty of having it demolished. Nevertheless, the building was finished and used as a synagogue, but ownership was actually transferred to Nicolas van Kampen, a member of the city council. In this way, the Sephardim and the Amsterdam authorities could claim that Judaism was being practiced in a private home rather than publicly. Secret Jews, cryptos. In fact, the legal right to public worship was not formally granted to Jews in Amsterdam prior to the emancipation of Dutch Jewry in 1795. Moreover, there was never any all-encompassing Jewry statute of law in the United Provinces. Instead, each municipality dealt with the issue of Jewish privileges on a case-by-case basis. In Amsterdam, a policy of inaction was pursued, whereby magistrates who were mostly elite merchants and keenly aware of the economic importance of the Sephardim generally ignored complaints or requests for restrictions against the Jews. The result of this ambiguity was that over the course of 17th century Jews were able to worship very publicly in Amsterdam, 1600s, right? They were able to be who they were. They didn't have to worry about the Catholics. In 1675, when the Portuguese Jewish population in Amsterdam was at its highest, about 2,500 people, the community dedicated a very large new synagogue, which still stands today. As the leaders of the Sephardic Jewish community began to thrive and feel secure in Amsterdam, 15 merchants and brokers established a charitable organization that reflected their commitment to Judaism and their sense of identity as members of an Iberian diaspora. The Iberian Peninsula, right? Spain and Portugal, a lot of the Mediterranean, a lot of North Africa. Again, melanated folks, guys. The Iberian diaspora. So these were people settling in Amsterdam after their persecution, not just Amsterdam, but Prussia, Germany, in France, and England, and Ireland, and all these European countries. And we're gonna have a book. I'm gonna prove it to you guys. I got all the sources. I'm gonna show you what I'm saying right now. I'm gonna show you the sources when I get back to Costa Rica, right? I'm gonna show you guys because it deals with Karl Marx. Karl Marx is a descendant of these people. That's why he was Swarthy, guys. Like it all connects, guys. Karl Marx, we did the video, right? We showed that he was being called the Moor, right? He was being called the Moor by his own family. That was his nickname. What was his background? It's the same background we're reading about right now, guys. This is what I want you to connect and understand. Okay? The same background. As the leaders of the Sephardic Jewish community began to thrive and feel secure in Amsterdam, 15 members, okay, we got this part already. So the Iberian diaspora in Amsterdam was called the Santa Compañía de Dotar Orphans, or Donceles Pobres, the Holy Confraternity of the provisions of dowries to orphans and poor maidens, and commonly referred to as the Dotar. It aimed to give dowries to poor new Christians, women of Iberian heritage, who promised to marry in conformity to the sacred law and live openly as Jews. Based in Amsterdam, the Dotar had correspondents in St. Jean de Luz, Bordeaux, Paris, Nantes, Rouen, Antwerp, and Hamburg. All these places, what I was saying, had all these black folks that had fled Spain and Portugal. Okay? Same places where Karl Marx people were coming out from. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Who were charged with finding suitable candidates. Later, correspondents from Recife, right? That's in Brazil, Curacao, and the island of Curacao, and other areas of the Atlantic diaspora joined the organization as well. The activities of the Dotar highlight the sense of mission many of the members of the Sephardim had to bring new Christians back to Judaism, people who had converted, their own people. Its headquarters in Amsterdam reflected the city's status as the leading Sephardi community of Western Europe. Whereas obfuscation was sufficient to protect the Sephardim in Amsterdam and foster its growth into the center of Judaism, the Dutch offered and Jews sought out more concrete freedoms and privileges in the Dutch colonies of the Atlantic world. Where? In the Dutch colonies. Most of them were in the Americas. Okay? The example of Dutch Brazil is instructive for the role of the West India Company. Okay? And vision for Jews in the colony. The perceived identity of new Christians living there, or converts. When they say new Christians, they mean converts, guys, who were Sephardic Jews and Moors, and the freedoms articulated in the charter for the colony. In 1621, the states general chartered the West India Company to deal with Dutch activities in the Atlantic world. While the West India Company's primary goal was to generate profits for its investors, its charter also indicated that it was founded on a maritime war machine to fight both the Habsburgs of Spain and Portugal. Body bag, oh, right there is deep. If you don't understand who's the Habsburgs, the Catholics, the Holy Roman Empire. We're talking about Charles V. Charles V, we're talking about a black man. That's who they're fighting. The West India Company was established for this. Listen, pay attention. So who is the West India Company? Who are the board members? I've shown who they were already in past videos, but I'm trying to tell you right now. Look how it all connects. Black on black, more and more war, right? Shout out to Drop. Black on black crime, right? You think it's all white folks. That's the thing. They always told us in history growing up that these were all white folks. And that throws us off completely. All right. So the West India Company was to generate profits, and its charter also indicated again that it was founded as a maritime war machine to fight both the Habsburgs of Spain and Portugal, the Holy Roman Empire. With these dual ends of profit and war, the West India Company turned its attention to Portuguese Brazil. John Andres Morbek, a leading advocate for the conquest of Brazil, so he's a Catholic, he's a Habsburg, right? Presented the West India Company's case to the Prince of Orange and the States General in 1623. Among the arguments for taking Brazil in his Redenen Werdrome, and it goes into a Dutch word, it says reasons why the West India Company must seek to take the lands of Brazil from the King of Spain. Two stand out as particularly informative about Dutch economic motivations and perceptions of the Portuguese new Christians or converts in the colony. According to Morbek, not only could the Dutch expect to make huge profit from capturing and controlling the means of sugar production, who was the sugar plantation owners producing sugar first was the Sephardic Moorish people, guys. I know you want to blame the white man, and okay, it was the Sephardic Jews who brought that over to the Americas. Okay, so the Catholics are like, yo, we got to take over their business. This is what I'm trying to tell you. They used them to set up shop, and then once they had set up shop, they came and took over everything that Sephardic Jews and the Moors, Muslim Moors had established. Okay, and that doesn't mean they were white. The Catholics were melanated too. Charles V was a black man. We've shown the proof. All right, if you still don't know, catch up. So, not only could Dutch expect to make a huge profit from capturing and controlling the means of sugar production, but they could also make sugar refineries in the Netherlands more profitable in the process by lowering transportation costs. Additionally, Morbek offered a telling opinion about the Portuguese New Christians living in Brazil, claiming almost all of them were actually Jews in disguise. This is what I'm trying to tell you guys. These were crypto Jews. They weren't really Christians. They only did that so they wouldn't get killed, so they would be accepted in the whole trade. New Christians, converts, crypto Jews. They were in reality practicing Jews in disguise, like it says here. He promised that if the West Indian Company offered them a religious freedom, they would welcome the Dutch as liberators and assist in the conquest. While Morbek's assessment of true religious identification of the Brazilian converts was obviously an exaggeration, his overall argument for taking possession of Brazil was persuasive. In January 1624, a West India Company expedition consisting of 26 ships under the command of Admiral Jacob Willekens and Vice Admiral Piet Hein sailed for Bahia, the capital of Brazil at that time, right? After a few brief skirmishes, the Dutch captured Bahia in May 1624. When they're saying Dutch, again, when they're naming countries, they mean the Catholics. When they're separating European countries from the Jews, so-called Jews, I know it's confusing, guys, but if you have the context of my research on the previous videos, you understand they just mean the Catholics took over, all right? And they took over the capital, right? In May 1624. Significantly, though actual evidence is scant, a perception existed in Spain and Portugal that crypto Jews in Brazil did in fact help the Dutch or the Catholics. A year later, in May 1625, when the Portuguese, again Catholics, returned in force and recaptured the region, a number of converts or cryptos were prosecuted for accepting passports and swearing allegiance to the Dutch. So a lot of them had sold out. They were helping the Catholics. This is deep right here, right? For the West India Company and those Portuguese colonists who sided with them, the first Dutch attempt in Brazil proved a disaster. When the Dutch planned another attempt to capture the world's greatest source of sugar in 1629, the West India Company aimed for Recife, the capital port of Pernambuco. In planning this conquest, the West Indian Company, in conjunction with the States General, devised a policy for the subsequent administration of a Dutch colony there, a Catholic colony, right? According to the charter which was given to the commander of the expedition, the Catholics were to respect the religious practices of all inhabitants of the conquered area. So they were still required to allow them to be Jews, isn't these Catholics? While the Reformed Church was to be the official religion of the colony. Reformed Protestantism, Reformed Calvinism. Remember Calvin? John Calvin was a crypto Jew. Remember the Huguenots follow Reformism. There's a reason why. This is what I'm saying. There's a connection with the Protestants, Sephardic Jews, and more guys. Okay? So while the Reformed Church was the official religion of the colony, a regulation that was articulated in 1621 founding charter of the West India Company enhanced a standard requirement for all Dutch Atlantic colonies. And missionary organizations such as the Jesuits were prohibited. The Jesuits couldn't be there. Pay attention. Why? Because they were so heavy Catholic. They didn't like the Sephardic Jews. They hanged. These people were killing the Sephardic Jews, right? So we don't want no Jesuits over here. The right of private worship was granted to Spanish and Portuguese and indigenous peoples alike. And indigenous peoples alike. All right? This is deep right here. According to the charter, Jews were permitted to worship in the colony as well. Thus, the charter effectively pledged the West India Company to actively protect religious minorities in Dutch Brazil, significantly including Judaism among the different religions to be respected. The so-called Catholic Dutch became the first Atlantic power to explicitly grant these Hebrew people of Spain and Portugal, the so-called Jews, the freedom to practice their religion in their homes, and the first to commit to defending them from inquiries and harassments because of their beliefs. The response of the Sephardim to the West India Company's Brazilian charter was electric. Jews accompanied the Dutch to Brazil as part of the military expedition, and once the West India Company was victorious in Pernambuco, a flood of Portuguese Jewish merchants, very swarthy people. Remember how these people are described in this time? Very swarthy, very so-called black, dark-skinned people. Portuguese Jews, right? Just like Columbus, Portuguese Jews, right? So a lot of them ended up in Pernambuco. There was a flood of Portuguese Jewish merchants, who's the merchants who owned all the trade since ancient times, migrated from Amsterdam to the colony. From Amsterdam, right? So if they're coming from Amsterdam, they would be classified as so-called Dutch. But in reality, a lot of them were Portuguese and Spanish crypto Jews, guys, or Moors, Muslims. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Okay? They were joined by a number of Portuguese converts, who had become Christians already living there, who under the protection of the West India Company, protection, why? Why is the West India? Because that's the board of members were Sephardic Jews, guys, and Moors, no longer feared the threat of the Catholic Portuguese Inquisition, and took the opportunity to return to Judaism. Morbeg had been correct, not in thinking that every convert was a Jew in disguise, but rather in arguing that offering religious privileges to Jews would benefit the West India Company and the Catholic Dutch Republic as a whole. Indeed, Portuguese Jewish colonists in Dutch Brazil were extremely valuable as translators between company officials and the Catholic Portuguese planters. Moreover, as historian Arnold Wisnitzer noted, Jews played a dominant role as financiers of the sugar industry. These were melanated folks, guys, not the white man, okay? Okay? Like, try to understand this. As brokers as well and exporters of sugar, the black folks, and suppliers of slaves on credit. What slaves? Many type of slaves, right? Accepting payment of capital and interest in sugar. Between 1630 and 1654, when the West India Company lost its hold on Pernambuco, the Sephardim created the first openly practicing Jewish community in the New World. At its height in 1645, before the onset of the Catholic Portuguese rebellion against the West India Company rule, so you see how the Catholics are fighting the West India Company. Understand, guys, who's in charge of the West India Company? The Jewish population of Dutch Brazil, so-called Jews, right? These Hebrew, Sephardic, Spanish, Portuguese people of Dutch Brazil may have been as many as 1,000. Between a third and a half of the European civilian settler total. A new charter arrived with Governor General Johann Moritz von Nassau-Siegen, Nassau, just like the capital, right? In August 1636, responding to requests from reformed clergy to curtail public worship by Jews and remonstrate from Christian merchants who felt threatened by Jewish economic power in the colony. Article 32 of the new charter reiterated the company's pledge to protect these Hebrew people, to worship. It confirmed the ability of Jews to engage in the retail trade and privilege unavailable to them in Amsterdam. Because of these favorable privileges, at least two Sephardic communities formed in the colony: Tesor Israel congregation in Recife and Mahin Abraham congregation just across the harbor in Mauritia. A number of rabbis, including Isaac Aboa, migrated to Dutch Brazil, and the elite merchants among the Sephardic inhabitants were able to establish a Mahamad to govern the communities. A Mahamad, that's why I was saying not just Sephardic Jews, but Muslim Moors. The Muhammad held administrative authority over all aspects of Jewish life in the colony, from grant admission to the religious school for children to burial in the Jewish cemetery. While it exercised a considerable amount of coercive power, it was also instrumental in fostering a sense of common identity among the diverse Jewish inhabitants of the colony. So listen, we talking about so-called white Jews, guys. Forget about colorism. You're talking about Ashkenazi, right? A lot of the Ashkenazi were melanated too, but that's a whole other thing. They converted. They converted during the Middle Ages. The Ashkenazi Jews took over all this stuff after the 1800s, way later, guys. They took over way later. This is why I'm trying to tell you, you must understand the context of history and time periods. Okay? They're not really so called Jews. They're not even Hebrew people. They converted to Judaism in the Middle Ages. They were Khazars and Edomites. They were the Edomites and Khazars who united. Okay? Those are your so called, what you see today being called the J word, all right? Let's try to stay on topic. And if you got questions, guys, I really recommend you guys catch up on the previous videos. We've been here 8 years. Welcome to the channel. But you got to make the time to catch up if you have questions so you can get all the context. And when you see all the research, you'll see what's being said here, and you have a lot of context to understand what they're saying. Okay? So forget about, we're not talking about them. We're not talking about them yet. That was later on. Yo, shout out Omek. What's up, bro? Thank you, man. Glad you like the reading, man. Okay? So where were we? Don't worry, Maria. Thank you for coming through anyways. So the Muhammad held the power still. Who was in charge? When the Sephardic Jews were in prosperity in Spain and Portugal, who was in charge? The Moors. They were under the Moors. So it seems like they still had power over them. So the Muhammad again held administrative authority over all aspects of Jewish colony. Okay? While it exercised a considerable amount of coercive power, it was also instrumental in fostering a sense of common identity among the diverse Jewish inhabitants of the colony. The long rebellion against West India Company rule and the eventual fall of the Dutch Brazil sent the Sephardim scattering across the Atlantic world. What happened to all these Sephardic that were established in Brazil and South America and the Caribbean? A lot of them ended up in the States, guys. A lot of them became your ancestors. Hey, listen. If you don't got time to catch up, I get it. There's priorities. It's all about priorities. But you can catch up on Game of Thrones and watch movies, right? Guys, you can watch my videos while you're working, while you're cleaning the house, while you're cooking. You have time. Don't listen. Time doesn't make you, right? No, what is it called? You make time. Time don't make you. You make time. It's up to you. It's up to you, guys. People are doing it. As you say, it's impossible. Well, if you don't got the priority, I understand. It's not your priority, but you're missing a lot of context. That's why we do full-on presentations where I'm showing you the sources. I'm not just reading. I'm showing you in the screen the actual sources, right? In the last 8 years. This is history we've already gone over. This is just another book telling us what we already know. Okay? So what happened? These people were spread out throughout the Atlantic world. because the Catholics took over everything, right? So where were we? Hold on. So they were scattered, having grown accustomed to worshiping freely. They were able to worship, be Jews again. Now they had to go into hiding again. Conducting transatlantic commerce, they were doing that. They were allowed to do that. Engaging in retail trade, owning property. These are black folks, guys, and enjoying the protection of a powerful company in Brazil. Many of these Hebrew people of Spain and Portugal sought to replicate this experience elsewhere in the Atlantic. But circumstances were sought to replicate this experience. Oh, sorry, I got that. But circumstances were different in other Atlantic locations. So they weren't so open to having Sephardic Jews be Jews in certain other colonies, right? And members of the Sephardic diaspora had to adjust their expectations and, in general, take a more active role in securing privileges and freedoms for themselves. Following the Dutch loss of Pernambuco, the influential Amsterdam rabbi Manasseh ben Israel, right, whose real name we found out in one of my videos was Manuel de Souza, something like that. That was his real name. The famous Manasseh ben Israel, who wrote a book called The Hope of Israel, who literally said, and we read his book, that it's going to take a large overtaking or undertaking in Massachusetts to convert these Indians into Christians because they were Jews. He literally said that because they were the original, because they were Hebrew people. They're not going to want to be Christians. He said that. He said that in the 1600s, guys. We read this. Jungle Bunny. Oh, okay. Hey, what's up, Tosh? What's up, brother? What's up, brother? Yo, shout out to the Tosh family, yo. Much love, man. So again, a lot of the Jamaican ancestry goes back to what I'm talking about right now, guys. Right now. Okay. So Masada, I hope we still link up in Kingston. Don't worry, I'm gonna hit you up. Guys, we want to hook up with me in Kingston. We can probably uh go to Devon House and do a meetup in Devon House. I'm gonna do a video on Devon House. I got a whole history. These were Sephardic Jews who owned that. The guy who owned that comes from Sephardic Jewish. He was a black European, and he has some Indian in him. He has some indigenous blood too. All right, I'm gonna show you guys all this. Okay, so I'm glad you guys are so knowledgeable now. Some of you, thank you, man. Thank you, man. Like, it's so real, man. Like I'm so like it's a blessing. Hawa is making sure the change is coming, guys. Like whether you want to believe it or not, change is coming. Everybody's gonna know this one day. All right, everybody's gonna know this. Okay. So where were we? So after they lost Pernambuco, Manasseh ben Israel undertook a journey to London to discuss readmitting Jews to England with Oliver Cromwell. Why Oliver Cromwell? He was a Protestant, right? Yeah, even though he was enslaving the Catholics or Jacobites, his people were the Protestants or Sephardic and Moorish people. Okay? Don't get lost. I'm thinking, oh, it's the white man. That's the white man. So yeah, they were the ones who got invaded by the British. A lot of these Sephardic, yes, exactly. Yes, 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 exactly. The English came and the Catholics, not so-called English, Catholics. Yeah. So Cromwell was interested in promoting overseas commerce and believed the widespread trade connections of the Sephardim would be beneficial to England. Portuguese New Christian merchants had been active in London since the mid 16th century. Now, however, the 1651 Navigation Act threatened their ability to conduct business, while openly practicing Sephardic Jewish merchants were anxious to establish a legal presence in London, whence they could engage with the developing English Empire. So this is what I was saying about your colonies, Jamestown and Roanoke. Who were these people really? And why did these people settle in these places? Especially Roanoke. They were forced, kind of hurried, because the Catholics were coming into England and these people had to flee. Same people they're talking about right now. They had established themselves in London. Okay? Portuguese convert merchants had been active in London since the mid 16th century. Now, however, the 1651 Navigation Act threatened their ability to conduct business while openly practicing. Oh, man, I already read this. Sorry. So, Ben Israel's meeting with Cromwell. I didn't know they ever met. This is pretty cool. So Ben Israel meeting with Cromwell resulted in the Whitehall Conference of December 1655, where merchants and ministers voiced their opposition to the readmission of Jews on economic and religious grounds instead of a formal ruling in former Jewish settlement in England. Cromwell was forced to adopt an unofficial readmission policy. Merchants of the Sephardic diaspora would be able to apply directly to him and after restoration to the crown for indemnization and thus live in England and trade legally within the English Atlantic. Okay, at least 90 Jews, so-called Jews, we're talking about those Portuguese and Spanish, right? Took this step between 1655 and 1680. I sound clear with the book down here? Sorry, I don't. Okay. By 1702, a Portuguese synagogue was dedicated for public worship. And in 1720, there were over 1,000 Sephardic Jews living in London. The establishment of the Portuguese Jewish community in England may have gained momentum from concurrent developments in the Caribbean. Members of the Sephardic diaspora fleeing Dutch Brazil settled in Barbados, ostensibly to continue trading in a commodity with which they had great experience. Sugar in 1652, several Jewish families set out from Barbados. Barbados was a stronghold for them. And a lot of these Barbados people ended up in South Carolina or the Southeast, became your ancestors, guys. I'm trying to tell you. Trust me, I've done people's genealogy and I found all this stuff. Ostensibly to continue trading in commodity with which they had great expertise, sugar. All right, so a lot of families from Barbados with English expedition to take possession of Surinam, another location with the potential of sugar production. Subsequently, individual Portuguese Jewish merchants began to acquire privileges to conduct business there. On 8 April 1661, for example, Benjamin de Caceres, Enrique de Caceres, and Jacob Fraso petitioned to King Charles II. Who's King Charles II, guys? Very swarthy, very so-called black man. Black Boy Inn is named after him. He's we got so many sources to King Charles being so-called black. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. Like we got I got more to show you too. Shout out to Kirkland. Shout out to the Kirkland files. He got mad sources on Charles II. So they're petitioning. So these are black folks petitioning to other black folks, right? To live and trade in Barbados and Suriname. As other Sephardim arrived in the colony, they settled near Casipora Creek, a minor tributary of the Suriname River. Here they seem to have established a separate Jewish cemetery, which more than just a practical consideration was an essential physical manifestation of the Jews' effort to maintain, or for the converts to reclaim, a sense of Jewish identity in the New World. Perhaps as many as 100 Jews migrated to Suriname in 1664 after the French captured a Dutch colony in Cayenne. Added to this number were refugees from Jewish settlements in the Dutch Wild Coast, colonies of Pomeroon and Essequibo, which we have read the whole history of them there, right? So that by 1667, the population of these Hebrew people in Suriname may have exceeded 200. In this decade, Jewish inhabitants continued to settle further along the Suriname River, clearing land and building houses in the area that would subsequently be known as Joden Savanne. The migration of Jewish settlers from the Dutch Wild Coast colonies to Suriname is illustrative of the interconnected colonization endeavors of these Hebrew people, right? These groups in the Caribbean and Southern Atlantic world after the fall of Dutch Brazil. So after they got kicked out of these places, right? So Cohen, Nazi, right? Nazi was a surname and a title for the Sephardic princes in Spain and Portugal in the Moorish Empire. Nazi. We've gone over this. He was from Amsterdam, right? Also known as Joseph Nunez de Fonseca. So they had like different names, right? So he was called, AKA David Cohen, Nazi, but his real name was Joseph Nunez de Fonseca, who had formerly lived in Recife. Was one such entrepreneur who attempted to settle Jews in several New World locations. In February 1652, for example, he obtained a patent from the West India Company to bring 50 Jewish colonists to Curacao. He was also involved in supplying the Jewish settlements at Essequibo and Pomeroon later in the decade. On 12th of September 1659, Yeah, he was melanated for sure. David Nazi or Joseph Nunez Fonseca, right? His name changed completely. This is what I'm saying. Not only his name changed, but he was whitewashed in history. He was whitewashed. So David Nazi and company received a charter from the directors of the West India Company to establish a colony in Cayenne. Why West India Company? Because this is the same people, guys. The privileges they received would have a great influence on the Jewish experience in Suriname. These economic privileges were designed to foster the colony's structural and productive development and encourage settlement, which it was hoped would provide the West India Company with a critical mass of colonists, thus strengthening the Dutch hold on the territory. In exchange for clearing and cultivating land, David Nazi and company and all the Jewish settlers were exempted from paying tithes and imposts to the West India Company for 20 years and from taxes on crops, dyestuff, and other wares produced in the colony for 5 years, and allowed free navigation and trade along the rivers and in the bays of the colony. The Jewish settlers were also these Hebrew people, melanated people, guys, don't get lost. Hebrew, black folks from Spain and Portugal, these settlers were also entitled to engage in the slave trade. Yeah, believe it or not, a lot of you still have a problem with that. You guys, you think it's the white man and the slave, like guys, and you think it's African slaves only. Like it wasn't about color. It wasn't about color. So they were able to entitle more and more war, right? This is what I'm saying. More and more black on black crime, right? Like shout out to Drop, man. Okay. So they were entitled to participate in the slave trade, albeit in slightly prescribed manner. The West India Company was to provide the bulk of the slaves for the colony, but Jewish colonists were allowed to capture slaves at sea. You guys hear that? At sea, pirates, bring them to the Cayenne and then trade them anywhere in the Atlantic on conditions that every fourth slave remain in the colony. These Hebrew people, like other colonists, were required to pay a 10 guilder tax per slave to the West India Company. In religious matters, the charter granted to David Nazi and company provided Jewish settlers in Cayenne with freedom of conscience and the privilege of public worship in a synagogue. Moreover, Jews were to enjoy these privileges throughout the entire colony, not simply in Nazi settlement. The special privileges the Jewish refugees from Cayenne had enjoyed and those secured by contemporaries in Curacao and Barbados must have played a role in the decision of the English authorities to offer the Sephardim similar freedoms in Suriname. A formal grant of privileges was passed by the Assembly and issued by Lieutenant Governor William Byam and the Council on 17th of August, 1655, aimed at keeping recent immigrants and recruiting additional Jewish settlers to the colony. The general privileges had a similar logic to the West India Company's charter in Brazil and granted freedoms comparable to David Cohen Nazi's patent in Cayenne. Byam and the council stated that it was in the best interest of the new colony to invite persons of whatever country and religion to come and reside here and traffic with us. Furthermore, the general privileges stated that the Jews already settled with persons and property had proved themselves useful and beneficial to this colony, and thus should be encouraged to continue their residence and trade here. The key, of course, to the acceptance of Portuguese Jews in Suriname, very swarthy people. Again, I know the word Jews throws a lot of you guys off, but we're not talking about the Ashkenazi Jews of today. They're totally different people, guys. We're talking about 1600s and 1700s, you know? So these Portuguese Jews in Suriname and elsewhere was their usefulness. Jews such as Benjamin de Caceres, listen to the last name, Caceres, Enrique de Caceres, and Jacob Fraso had valuable trade connections with Barbados and England. While the refugees from Cayenne, right, including Samuel Nazi, were commercially connected to the Netherlands. The inhabitants of Suriname were already well aware of the advantages that would accrue from the trade with these Sephardic crypto merchants based in the Netherlands, all right? With developing the colony's economy, clearly underlined the encouragement of these crypto Jews settlements in Suriname. The general privileges granted the Portuguese Sephardic Jews freedoms which actually went beyond those of the Dutch had offered or the Catholics had offered elsewhere in the Atlantic world, and those the crypto Jews in England itself enjoyed at the time. Every member of the Portuguese crypto Jewish nation in the colony, or who arrived to live and trade after the promulgation of the general privileges would possess and enjoy every privilege and liberty possessed by and granted to the citizens and inhabitants of this colony, and shall be considered as English born. Significantly, while Jews in England and in the recently acquired North American colony of New York had to petition for indemnization in order to participate in commercial activities, these Hebrew people of Portugal and Spain and Suriname were granted outright every privilege and liberty which we, the so-called English, ourselves enjoy, whether derived from laws, acts, or customs, either regarding our lands, our persons, or other property. Furthermore, the general privileges stated in case the previous language was not sufficiently clear that on a condition that they be true subjects of the King of England, Jews were to have full liberty to plant, trade, and do whatsoever they may consider conducive to their advantage and profit. Clearly, Suriname's marginal location and limited commercial development induced the English to privileges that would have been seen as unnecessary or even controversial elsewhere in the Atlantic. In religious matters, the general privileges permitted the Jews, these Hebrew, Sephardic, Spanish, and Portuguese people, right, to practice and perform all ceremonies and customs of their religion. 10 acres of land were also granted to these crypto Jewish communities, all right, for the express purpose of building a synagogue and a school, thus making the practice of Judaism in Suriname under the English a matter of public policy, right? So this is very important when it comes to the ancestry of Van Sertima, the Pan African Van Sertima, so called Dutch. That's not his slave name, that's his people's. Same people we're talking about right now. And you think he didn't know his genealogy? When you're talking about, oh, out of Africa and all this Africa stuff, you think he didn't really know? We did his genealogy in his video. You saw, you think he didn't know his grandparents? So that makes me believe these were gatekeepers, guys. That's what I'm saying. Don't take it personal, right? Don't take it personal. So look at all the privileges they get in Suriname, right? And Guyana, like this is all the places we're talking about right now. Cayenne and all these Pomeroon, that's where his people are from, right? So they can practice Judaism in Suriname under the English a matter of public policy rather than just a simply tolerated private one. Additionally, Jewish marriages were deemed valid. Inheritance practices upheld, and a promise made not to summon them before a court or magistrate on their Sabbath. The far-reaching privileges granted by the English in Suriname ensured Jews protection in both the commercial and the religious spheres, and probably persuaded the recently arrived refugees from Cayenne of the advantages of remaining in the colony. So a lot of them, these people, when they were referred to refugees, that's because the Catholics are kind of taking over certain spots and kicking them out, or they had to flee, right? However, this religious and economic security was called into question less than a year and a half later when the Second Anglo-Dutch War, 1665 to 1667, threw the colony into the chaos. The Dutch were awarded the colony in the Peace of Breda, which officially ended the war of 31st of July, 1667. Abraham Crimson, the Dutch privateer, just a fancy word for pirate, a hired pirate, right? Who are your pirates? This is very important when it comes to Jamaica, guys. Port Royal and all this stuff, right? We have the history, right? The real pirates of the Caribbean, the real ones, guys. Just like in the movie, the real ones, the melanated folks, crypto Jews. So this guy, Abraham Crimson, the Dutch privateer, now in command of the colony, declared that the Jews should continue to enjoy the privileges granted by the English or Catholics. Remember, when they separate so-called Jews from the European country, like when they're naming, they mean the Catholics. So, furthermore, Crimson added that all the present inhabitants, whatever their nationality, shall have and enjoy the same privileges as the Dutch among whom they shall dwell. Crimson's grants were endorsed by the state of Zeeland the following year. The Portuguese crypto-Jewish inhabitants of Joden, Savanne, were eventually able to build a synagogue in 1685 on land donated by Samuel Nazi, named Beraha Vesalum. The synagogue was constructed on high ground in a courtyard in the town center. So if you guys are from these areas and you know the history and you're from there, you guys now understand the background. I know you thought these were all white folks. I bet you did. And I'm telling you they weren't. A lot of these are your ancestors. Again, who mixed with American Indians. It's not, I'm not saying you're just black European, but you got this in you too, man. All right? So made of brick and standing 33 feet high, it was the tallest structure in Joden, Savanne. These Hebrew people, their rituals were observed according to Sephardic practices. Though at least 12, listen, so listen, there was at least 12 Ashkenazi families though. At least 12. The rest were Sephardic Jews. These were melanated folks. Okay? Then Ashkenazis are converts. They're not even Hebrew people, they're converts. So there was at least 12 families there were present in Jordan Savanne during this period as well. The community's first rabbi, Amsterdam trained Isaac Nieto, listen to the last name, Nieto, had arrived in Suriname in 1680. 5 years later, the synagogue was dedicated by Rabbi David Pardo. Rabbi David Pardo. Like, what do we know about Pardo last name, guys? So, all right. So we got Juan Pardo, who was a conquistador, who he proved he was so-called black. He's described as a black man. He brought Pardo. Pardo left a lot of lineage, and he did a lot in the southeast, in South Carolina, and the Carolinas, and Tennessee. A lot of your Cherokees are the people that Pardo came with. You know, a lot of your Cherokees are these Sephardic black Europeans and Irish, and Pardo means brown. Pardo means brown in Spanish. Pardo, they were calling people, brown complexion people, they were calling them Pardos too. Okay? Brown, right? Aren't you brown? Pardo means brown, guys. So there's Rabbi David Pardo, who might be related to Juan Pardo, right? Who had also moved to the colony from Amsterdam. Pardo came from one of the most respected rabbinic families in Amsterdam. These were Sephardic crypto Jews, guys, melanated folks, guys. Perhaps suggesting the significance with which the parent community viewed the South American outpost. Another rabbi named Arias is identified on a map of Suriname drawn during the 1680s. During the 1670s and 1680s, the colony's economy began to accelerate, due in no small part to the Hebrew crypto Jewish inhabitants. Previous plantation experiences and commercial connections. They had all the connections, guys. These are melanated folks, guys. They had all the ships. They owned the ships. They owned all the trade in the Atlantic, guys. We've gone over there. They were called the Port Jews. They were called Port Jews. That's what they were. They had connections everywhere, guys. The trade, right? Notarial records reveal the efforts of these Hebrew planters and merchants to develop the colony's infrastructure and commercial potential. This is the history they leave out about black folks or certain black folks. They wanted you to think that these were all white folks. Okay? So they developed their infrastructure and commercial potential, including contracts for the delivery of goods to Suriname from Amsterdam in exchange for sugar produced by the co-signed to these crypto Jews that were producing the sugar, right? Sugar exports from Suriname to the Netherlands rose steadily throughout the 1680s from 3.5 million pounds weights in 1684 to 7 million pounds 4 years later. As these crypto Jews made up almost a quarter of Suriname's population, almost a quarter, the ones that were open, right? And owned 40 plantations in 1694. They owned, these were black folks, they owned what? 40 plantations, right? Break out of that. Empty your cup, guys. And don't get upset. Don't take none of this personal, right? Their importance to the colony's overall economic production during the 17th century was quite significant. Why am I teaching you guys this? Why are we reading about this? Why are we learning? Because this is the history of black folks. They don't teach you. They want you to think all blacks were just African slaves. So this is a part of the history, so-called black history, right? They want to say I'm a black historian. So now we're talking about black history right here, so-called black, right? So don't leave this out. We can't leave this history out, guys. You must understand. You must understand, understand. Shout out to the Rastas. I hope they're understanding and watching. Yeah. This is your ancestry, a lot of you Rastas. Okay? So, very significant history here that was left out. of the history books or our curriculum and whitewashed. So while these crypto Jews made important commercial, military, social, and political contributions, they were allowed to vote for members of the colony's assembly, but not serve in it. Huh. Just like black folks, just like black folks. To 17th century Suriname. They sought to retain as much communal autonomy as possible and remain on the margins. Okay? Cheers. Don't ask me what I'm drinking, man. Indeed, much of the appeal of Joden Savanne, yep, must have been its relative isolation. The crypto Jews could practice their religion and live their lives comparatively free from the watchful eyes of reform predicants or colonial officials or the Catholics. Nevertheless, they had to guard against encroachments upon the curtailments of their privileges and immunities. The situation in Suriname required particular diligence as the administration of the colony changed hands frequently. In 1682, the West India Company assumed control of Suriname from the states of the province of Sealand. Later that same year, the West India Company sold two-thirds of its proprietary rights to two partners, the city of Amsterdam and the Arsene van Sommelsdijk family. Huh. The West India Company, the city of Amsterdam, and the Arsene van Sommelsdijk became equal partners in a new entity called the Chartered Society of Suriname. From its headquarters in Amsterdam, the society gave the West India Company a monopoly in the slave trade. All right, major drop here. This is not white folks, guys. Who they're enslaving? American Indians, black Europeans in general. Indentured servitude, all that. It's not just chattel slavery. They had contracts, a lot of these people. Okay? We've gone over the info, guys. So they had a monopoly. The West India Company, we know that, right? They want us always to think, oh, they went in Africa and took millions of people and they were the white man and all this stuff. But we already knew this stuff, right? But once you understand the context and the background, who's the board of directors of the West India Company? These were, a lot of them were crypto Jews, Muslim Moors. You guys got to understand real history. Hey, a lot of the Maroons are still Pan African. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry to tell you guys. They can't let go because even if they personally believe they're not, they still go with the flow with the rest of the Maroons because they don't want to look bad or I don't like disrespect, like how I didn't want to disrespect that Rasta elder. So they fall into just like, yeah, just saying, yeah. We're still little African. We still show me the genealogy. Show me the genealogy. We're talking about real history right here, right? That's what's up, Tosh. That's what I'm saying, man. Like, yeah, man, you gotta listen, guys. I know you guys don't think like, you know, somebody wanted me to go interview the Maroon Queen, and I was like, you sure? Are you sure that's a good idea? You know how I am. You know they're very Pan Africanish. Are you sure that's a good idea? You got to make sure. You got to let her know before we do that, right? I don't mind doing these things, but you know, we got to make sure, right? Anyways, let's continue. Like we're almost done, like we're doing good. We're getting the whole chapter, right? Hopefully my battery don't die, my mic battery don't die, hopefully. So, so their headquarters of this society was in Amsterdam. They monopolized the slave trade, right? Banned Catholics from settling in the colony. That's major drop right there. Why would the West India Company ban Catholics? Because again, who is the West India Company? I'm trying to tell you guys, who is the West India Company? All right. Yeah, Costa Rica too. I know. We know in Costa Rica who the Limon people are, and a lot of the black folks there, so-called black. They're from Jamaica. Like you guys should visit Limon, Costa Rica. You feel like you're in Jamaica a lot of the time. Anyways, let's continue, right? Not get off subject. Anyways, so so they so they banned Catholics. West India Company banned the Catholics. Why would they do that if they were supposed to be Catholics, right? from settling in the colony and appointed Cornelius van Artsen van Sommersdicht the new governor. Governor van Sommersdicht, I can't even say, Sommersdicht arrived in the capital Paramaribo in November 1683. Soon after, he wrote, I must give expression to the immense satisfaction I derive and continue to derive daily from the industry, zeal, affection, and honesty of those of the crypto-Jewish nation. The crypto-Jews, these Hebrew people from Spain and Portugal. And I wish that I could say even one-fourth of the same of our so-called Catholics. Nevertheless, he began to make laws which contravened the privileges that these crypto-Jews had enjoyed since 1665. Specifically, he prohibited these crypto-Jews from working their slaves and conducting business amongst themselves on Sundays. He also called into question the legality of the crypto-Jewish marriage contracts because they failed to include a civil certificate issued by the local government. Van Sommersdicht's Sabbath policies, which meant that Jewish or crypto-Jewish owned businesses and plantations would cease production on both Saturdays and Sundays, threatened the economic position of Jews by putting them at a competitive disadvantage to their Christian neighbors or Catholic neighbors. Moreover, his questioning of Jewish marriage contracts was seen as an attack on Jewish autonomy. These crypto Jews, right? Which, if left unchecked, could lead to the curtailment of other crypto Jewish practices in the colony. The Jewish community protested to the directors of the Chartered Society of Surinam on May 16, 1885, or 20th May 1685. The director's response, dated to December 10, 1685, was a victory for the crypto Jewish community. On July 1694, however, Governor Johann von Schurthuisen, who had replaced von Sommersdicht, reinstated the ban on Sunday work. Once again, the Jews wrote to Amsterdam, this time to Baron Belmonte and Samuel Nazi, who had recently moved there from Surinam. The Belmonte, all right, so a lot of the food that's owned today, guys, in the supermarkets, Belmonte, this is the family. This is the family, guys. I don't know if you've seen the product Belmonte. This is the family. And Nazis succeeded in getting, and once more, they ruled in favor of the Jewish community. They were crypto Jews, the Belmonte family that owned the food thing today, right? However, in the second decade of the 18th century, when a large number of these crypto Jews moved to Paramaribo, ministers from the Dutch and French Reformed churches, Catholics, right, that had become Reformed, petitioned to have crypto Jewish shops in the city closed on Sundays. Considering the relative power of the Calvinists in Paramaribo, the directors decided to uh, placate them. And this time, the crypto Jews lost their privilege to do business on Sundays, whereas the Jews of 17th century Joden Savanne had been extremely useful contributors to the development and stability of Suriname, and thus capable of extracting privileges from colonial authorities. Those of 18th century Paramaribo were not so distinctly valuable or worthy of special exemptions. While some members of the Sephardic diaspora were settled in Suriname and other areas of the wild coast of South America, others migrated to Curacao, which was then controlled by the West India Company. I mean, I wonder if it's getting too dark for you guys. Let me know. I can turn on a light. I think the light somewhere. I mean, the light's here, so maybe you guys will be able to see me still. Oh, I lost my place. My fault. Okay. Considering the relative power of the Calvinists and Paramaribo Calvinists, so-called Huguenots, the directors decided to placate them. Oh, I already read this, sorry. Whereas the Jews of 17th century Joden Savanne had been extremely useful contributors to the development of the stability of Suriname and thus capable of extracting privileges from colonial authorities, those of 18th century Paramaribo were not so distinctly valued or worthy of special exemptions. While some members of the Sephardic diaspora were settled in Suriname and other areas of the wild coast of South America, others migrated to Curacao, which was then controlled by the West India Company, as in Cayenne and Essequibo. Portuguese crypto-Jewish merchants were granted charters to settle whole communities in Curacao. In 1652, for example, the directors of the West India Company granted David Cohen-Nazi, remember his name is Fuentes, Juan something, Joseph, Fuentes, permission to settle a colony of crypto-Jews on the island of Curacao. According to the term of the contract, Nazi and his colonists were to farm and raise livestock along 2-mile coastal strip provided to them by the company. They were also given a 10-year exemption from paying taxes on any of the produce they succeeded in growing. They were not, however, permitted to cut down dyewood trees or establish salt pans, two valuable economic activities that the company revered for itself. Additionally, they were encouraged to engage in privateering. They were encouraged on what? Pirating against Portuguese shipping or Catholic shipping. The Catholics. They were encouraged. They were being told to do this, right? The real pirates of the Caribbean. In return for the improvement of the crypto-Jewish settlers were to make on Curacao, the company promised to neither obstruct nor hinder the aforesaid patroon and colonists in any way, or patrons, right? But rather give them as much help and assistance as possible. Finally, to prevent scandalous activities, Jews were prohibited from employing Catholic servants on Sundays. Just like in the Americas, allow you can't enslave a Catholic, blah 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 blah, or Christian, must be an Indian or Negro. In contrast to the explicit promise to protect Jewish worship granted to crypto Jews in Dutch Brazil, Nazi's charter made no mention of any specific religious privileges. Whether this oversight was intentional or not known, perhaps he felt that the recent experience in Dutch Brazil and continued intolerance of Jewish practice in Amsterdam was sufficient proof that the West India Company would not proscribe crypto-Jewish worship in Curacao. Indeed, another crypto-Jewish community led by Joao de Ilan had already been practicing Judaism in Curacao for several months without any explicit protections and without any reported incidents. For David Nazi and his intended settlers, however, this issue ultimately proved to be irrelevant. No evidence exists to suggest that Nazi ever migrated to Curacao or that his efforts resulted in any crypto Jews going to the island to take possession of the land granted by the West India Company. The issue of religious freedom would, however, be of paramount importance to the next group of Jewish settlers who contracted to go to Curacao in 1659. Directed by Isaac Da Costa, the Da Costa family, Sephardic Jews, so-called Irish in South Carolina, the Da Costas were so-called Irish, right? But they were actually Sephardic crypto Jews, and they were described as melanated black folks, swarthy. We proved it. We got a video on the Da Costas of South Carolina. Go check my video out, guys. Same family here, same relations to this Da Costa. Same family, right? So Isaac da Costa, formerly a leading member of the Portuguese crypto-Jewish community, like I was saying, they're not just Irish, in Recife, and a nephew of controversial Amsterdam dissident Uriel da Costa, the settlers consisted of a number of experienced colonists and achieved a critical mass of over 70 men, women, and children. Though Isaac da Costa's charter from 31 of March 1659 is now lost, a summary of the privileges were written in 1825 when it was still extant in Curacao. Chief among them was the free exercise of their religion here, a guarantee of protection by the company, and the ability to build houses for themselves on the island. Given the harassment and ill will that Peter Stuyvesant had demonstrated towards the Brazilian crypto-Jewish communities or refugees in the Netherlands earlier in the decade, it is not surprising that the Curaçao colonists received a written guarantee and positive affirmation from the West India Company of their freedom to practice Judaism on the island. All right. I feel like moving, guys. Hold on. Let me just move a little bit so we can get a little bit more light. And also to help me with the reading. Okay. Help me with the reading. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I got the pool in the background. We're in the Caribbean, baby. Okay. We're in the Caribbean. We're almost done. We got like 2 more pages, guys. So just stick around. We're almost done, right? They were also given permission to buy slaves, a privilege that would be important in their trans-Caribbean trade. and would result in significant slave ownership by members of the community. Again, these were black folks. I know a lot of you don't want to hear that, but these were black folks. Elias, let me know if the mic goes out, okay? Isaac the Coast and other Jewish colonists probably left Amsterdam for Curaçao sometime after 11th of May 1659. This date is known because of a notarial document records that Isaac the Coast purchased from the Muhammad of Tamul Torah congregation in Amsterdam a Torah scroll with an orange cloth cover to take with him to Curaçao. This also suggests that Muhammad approved of the project. Taking such a precious object to the colony illustrates that the Costa and the other participants had faith in the West India Company's promise to uphold their religious liberties and that they also intended to make a permanent settlement in Curaçao. Indeed, the Jews who arrived in 1659 and throughout the 1660s made an effort to create a sense of permanence and forge a community on the island. While they had much economic interaction with the Protestant inhabitants of the island, they occupied a negotiated social space within and without the larger Dutch population or Catholic population. Because of their traditional position on the margins and the fact that their lives were lived almost exclusively within Mikve Israel congregation, the Sephardic Jews of Curacao, like those of Amsterdam, tended to build houses close to one another and near the synagogue. Typically, these crypto-Jewish merchants lived with their families in the Punda section of Willemstad, where a street called Jodenstraat was located, in which over time became a predominantly crypto-Jewish neighborhood. All right, guys. So again, if you know these areas, if your family's from there, if you've been there, this is the history, guys. These were melanated folks, Sephardic Jews and Moors. Yes, Sephardic Jews and Moors, not white folks. In 1702, there was 126 mostly Sephardic families comprising over 600 crypto-Jews in Curacao. Wow. The following year, fifth synagogue was built to accommodate the right, hold on, growing community. Curaçao's Jewish or crypto-Jewish population rose through continued immigration from locations throughout the Atlantic world and through natural increase. That Curaçao could sustain a growing Jewish population had much to do with the economic opportunities available to the crypto-Jewish residents of the island. They were able to conduct legal and extra-legal trade throughout the Atlantic world, own ships and small plantations, and establish themselves as brokers in Curaçao. Again, these are black folks, guys, so-called Negro people, not the white man. I just want you guys, the new people, to understand this. No fewer than 25 plantations were owned by the Jews in Curaçao, or crypto Jews in Curaçao. 25 plantations, guys. At the beginning of the 18th century, the climate of Curaçao prevented a large-scale agricultural production, but plantation owners did grow indigo, lemons, oranges, eggplant, okra, okra. Listen, okra. Listen, man, pay attention. Okra. All right, where were we? Where did I go? And potatoes. All right, more and more war. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Plantation owners also engaged in livestock breeding and trading, sometimes providing the West India companies with goats and sheep to feed the company's slaves. All right, huh? Goat, curry goat, huh? We're so-called slaves, huh? To feed the slaves the goat, huh? Curry goat. That's what I'm trying to tell you, guys. There's a history to everything, man. There's a history to everything, man. Crypto Jews made themselves valuable to the West India Company through their commercial connections from their earliest moments in the colony. For example, in January 1656, Mordecai and Joshua Enriquez imported a wide array of goods to Curaçao, including earrings, pearls, knives, scissors, thimbles, and needles. All their goods were valued according to their weight in sugar. For example, the 100 thimbles and their shipment cost of 150 pounds sack of sugar, or 1.5 pounds of sugar per thimble. While Mordecai and Joshua Enriquez provided important tools to help develop the fledgling colony and establish a stock of goods to trade with other islands and the nearby Spanish mainland, what Curaçao needed most in the mid 1650s was foodstuff. In February 1656, a crypto-Jewish merchant named Isaac de Fonseca arrived aboard the Constant Ana from Barbados. From where? From Barbados. Armed with a letter of introduction from the governor of Barbados and a request to be allowed to trade with the West India Company or the island's inhabitants, de Fonseca promised that in return the company would have the same trade privileges in Barbados. Significantly, da Fonseca also had 4,000 pounds of flour, a large barrel of hard bread, a pipe of brandy, 6 barrels of beer, oil, and parcels of goods. After a long debate between da Fonseca and vice director Matthias Beck, he exchanged his cargo for 14 horses and an unspecified amount of dyewood. The arrival of greater number of Sephardic Jews with Isaac da Costa's colony in 1659 led to his large-scale trading operations on the island. They were all coming together. Jewish settlers further developed trade relationships with Barbados and began a commercial and communal exchange with co-religionists in Dutch New Netherland and, to a much greater extent, English New York. New York has a very uh, prominent connection with these Sephardic Jews, guys, and the establishment of the first settlers of New York. That's why it was called New Amsterdam, guys. You got to understand the whole history. New Amsterdam, right? New York, right? In 1676, for example, Jacob de Lucena sent food from New York City to Curacao in exchange for slaves. Where are they getting their slaves? They're coming from Curacao, not coming from Africa. Listen, pay attention. Most of the slaves are coming from the Caribbean, the ones that are saying are foreign, and back and forth, not directly from, right? And then Europe. Okay, where were we? Sorry. During the first half of the 18th century, the ties between the crypto Jews in New York, and Curacao were especially close, very close. Daniel Gomez of New York married Esther Levi of Curacao to cement the commercial relationship between these families. Subsequently, he sent over 100 vessels to the island, co-signing the cargoes to 35 different correspondents, all of whom were Sephardic Jews, melanated so-called black folks. All right, I hope you guys are understanding what we're reading here. All right, we're almost done. We're literally in the last page, guys. All right, don't go nowhere. Moreover, in religious matters, when New York's Sheriff Israel congregation began a campaign to raise money to construct a new synagogue on Mill Street in 1729, the second largest contribution to the building fund came from the crypto Jews of Mikve Israel and Curacao. All right, family representatives in Europe, again, families in Europe, these are black folks, and Amsterdam in particular, helped make the commercial activities of crypto Jewish colonies in Curacao possible. According to historian Wim Klooster, commercial families constructed networks to sustain the activities of crypto-Jewish merchants across the Atlantic. They supplied the goods that were so important in the exchange between Curaçao and the colonies of the Spanish Main and rest of the Caribbean, which was the mainstay of both Jewish and Christian merchants on the island. Many of the recent Sephardic immigrants had a language advantage, as their ancestors were originally from Spain. They were what? Originally from Spain. Originally from Spain. We're not talking about Ashkenazi Jews. We're talking about black folks, guys. Originally from Spain. All these so-called English, all these Dutch, all these so-called Irish. This is what I'm telling you. All right. Hey, we got a lot of people in the chat. You guys there? You're paying a lot of attention, huh? See the chat. There we go. Yeah, Devin House. Devin House, yes. Devin House, I'm gonna do the video. He was a Sephardic Jew and Indian. He had indigenous blood and Sephardic Jewish heritage. That's why he had all this money and stuff. The Devin House, guys. I'm gonna do the video. Watch. I'm gonna prove it to you. You're gonna see it. This is gonna connect to this. The Devin House is gonna connect to this, guys. I'm gonna tell you. And Port Royal, the pirates. I'm trying to tell you guys. Real history we're learning here. You gotta empty your cup. We're almost done. We're literally almost done, right? So they were originally from Spain, a lot of these people, and they were thus able to communicate. They had the same language, right, with their trade partners in the Spanish colonies. All right. Textiles, linens, cotton cloths, and silk fabrics were acquired from the major production areas of Europe by Amsterdam merchants and sent to Curacao for trade with Spanish America, where these items were in high demand. Venezuelan cacao, tobacco, indigo, coffee, vanilla, cochineal, lemon juice, dyewood, logwood, sugar, and ginger were the main commodities exported to Amsterdam from Curacao. As the Sephardic population of Curacao continued to increase during the first third of the 18th century, the Jews outgrew the 1703 synagogue. Between 1730 and 1732, another building was constructed, modeled on the Sephardic synagogue in Amsterdam. The new Mikve Israel synagogue was 77 feet long, 57 feet wide, 50 feet high, and had a mahogany interior. The floor was covered in sand imported from Jerusalem, wow, as a tribute to Portuguese crypto Jews who were supposed to have covered the floors of sorry, their secret synagogue in the Iberian Peninsula to muffle the sounds of their footsteps. The new synagogue was dedicated on the first day of Passover, 1732. It remains in use today and is the oldest synagogue building in the Americas, built by black folks, Hebrew people from Spain and Portugal, the oldest, the oldest in the Americas. No, this is not the synagogue of Satan. Israelite, you're confusing. No, Israelite, bro, stop. Or sister, no, you're wrong, man. We're not talking about the Ashkenazi Jews, man. We're not talking about the Ashkenazi Jews. Israel, come on, bro. You've been listening to me for a while, bro. These are your family. A lot of these, stop trying to make them separate from who you. I'm telling you guys, these are black folks. A lot of these are your ancestors, guys. Come on, you gotta pay attention. Watch from the beginning, or try to catch up on my Sephardic Jewish videos, guys. We're not talking about the synagogue of Satan. That's the Ashkenazi guys. That's the Chazars. That's the Chazars, guys. Why you get so confused? That's the Chazars. I need you guys to understand this. This is a big important detail. That is the Chazars. These are literally Hebrew people from Spain and Portugal. They have more connections to the Hebrew people than the Ashkenazi who are converts, guys. Remember, they converted in the Middle Ages. They are Khazars and Edomites. We're not talking about them, guys. We're not talking about them. Okay? And we got one more paragraph, one more page. It says overall, the early crypto Portuguese Jewish inhabitants of Curacao negotiated charters, the 1659 grant to Isaac da Costa in particular for their settlement, which protected their freedom to worship. Having secured this important privilege, Sephardims or Sephardic Jews flowed to the colony from Amsterdam and other places in the Caribbean to take advantage of the island's location. All these people settle in all the Caribbean, guys. I'm trying to tell you, this is a lot of your heritage that you don't know about. You want to just be Indians and you want to make every European white and this. No, guys, I'm trying to tell you a little bit about your history here. Empty your cup with that, all that stuff, man. We're not talking about the Ashkenazis, guys, please. So, sorry. As merchant traders with access to a wide variety of European products, the crypto Jews not only made themselves valuable to local Dutch authorities and the West India Company as a whole, but to the economies of the Spanish, English, and French Atlantic colonies as well. Because of these two factors, religious freedom, and economic opportunity, Curaçao flourished as a haven for Sephardic Jews and developed into the capital of the New World crypto jewelry during the 18th century, 1700s, and Curacao. And it says here, conclusion, right? The last paragraph, conclusion, right? The Sephardic Jews never achieved full parity with their Catholic neighbors in the early modern era. Even after their emancipation, I thought that was only for African slaves, emancipation in Western Europe, at the end of the 18th century, they still faced customary restrictions and prejudices. Prejudices. These are black folks, guys. Prejudices. Nevertheless, as this chapter has demonstrated, Sephardic Jewish merchants were able to negotiate a space for themselves to live, work, and worship in the Caribbean and Southern Atlantic. The privileges and freedoms they acquired often depended on the particular circumstances of the ports or colonies they settled and were subject to change over time. In actively engaging with imperial or company officials to secure charters and concessions, members of the Sephardic diaspora took advantage of the available opportunities, proved their usefulness, and helped develop the Atlantic world while making this world work for them. In the process, Sephardic Jews exhibited a common purpose and fostered a sense of shared identity that transcended the bounds of empire. All right, this is a very important history that was left out of our history teachings, our curriculum. This history was whitewashed. A lot of this history is in your blood, guys. And I know a lot of you don't want to be this. A lot of you don't want to be this, but I'm trying to tell you, when you do your genealogy, you're gonna find a lot of this. When you hear Portuguese, or when you hear like Champal in Jamaica, his Portuguese Jews were Sephardic Jews, guys, were black folks. The guy who owns Devon House, I'm gonna show you guys. That's why he was a black, he had black European in him, right? So again, this was the book, The Jews in the Caribbean, by Jane S. Gerber. We just read chapter 3. Okay? We're done. We're done for today, chapter 3. Okay? So thank you guys for tuning in to the whole chapter. If you was here the whole time, if you watched this later, I appreciate you guys. Again, if you're new to my channel, please catch up on the historic videos. I show the sources, not just read from them like this, but I actually show them because I'm in my computer, screen sharing my screen, and we're doing all the research in the last 8 years so you guys can understand a little bit of the true history and maybe a little bit about yourself. You're still Indian. Don't think I'm not saying not Indian. You're still Indian, guys. But there's more to you too, man. There's more to you too. And I hope you've been enjoying the blogs, my traveling blogs and everything. But this is what my channel is really about. It's not about blogs, okay? So if you're new here from the blogs, maybe it was destiny. It was meant to be that you just showed up because of the blogs. But now you're here to learn real history. And I hope you take the time to do that. Take the opportunity. If you like history, make it a priority. Okay? Yeah, this is a pretty good book. I have many books on the Sephardic Jews. I have many of my Sephardic Jewish books on my Patreon page. I don't have this one, but I'm gonna scan this. Okay, I'm gonna scan this when I get back, and we're gonna do a PDF for you guys and share it on my Patreon page. Okay, this is a pretty good book. We've read a lot of this history in previous videos. So it literally matches everything we've been reading and learning. Who was really helping colonize the Americas? Who did they use? These colonists, they used black folks, these melanated, these people who were connected, you know, so-called Jews, right? They're not the same as the Ashkenazi Jews, guys. Make sure you understand that. That's the most important detail about this, all right? There's probably Jewish restaurants all over Chiril. I don't know. I didn't go to the restaurants, Tosh, Rakan. But I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. Okay. Hope you guys enjoyed the reading. Let me see if you guys can kind of see me. It's kind of dark. Let me see if you guys can see me. Hold on. Let me see. Let me see something. Okay, let me see. You guys can kind of see me, right? All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and end it right here. But what I want to do first. Hopefully the internet don't cut off, right? I'm gonna dive into the pool because I'm hot, guys. Like it was not easy reading in the hot, and my family's walking around, and that's why I did the mic, and maybe they heard, maybe they heard. I hope they learned. Yeah, so we're by the pool, so I'm gonna take advantage, and I'm gonna do a little quick dive. I'm gonna do a little swim, and I'm gonna come back and end the live, okay? But I want you guys to see that, all right? All right. Hold up, guys. Hold up. Stick around for the dismount. Hold on, I got you. Yeah, how we do it, baby. This is how we do it, baby. All right, this is how we do it, guys. We got to do the dive for the dismount, okay? We're gonna do the dive for the dismount, all right? Bear with me. I hope you guys can see a little bit. We're gonna do the dive for the dismount. I'm literally gonna dive. Let me bring the mic a little bit. Hold up. I had to take all my rings and stuff off in the shirt. Damn, my ant bit me in my foot right now, but I'm used to that from my yard. You guys can see me? Yeah, maybe a little bit, not really, but I'm gonna dive right now. Okay? Hawa, wata, the wata. Me dive into the wata, man. Yeah, you already know, man. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Woo! Ah, yeah, that was good, guys. Yeah, feels good. Gotta take advantage of every moment. All right. As you guys see, I'm not normal, man. Like this is what we do. This is what I do, guys. I ain't a normal person, man. Did you guys see the dive? It's pretty dark. It's pretty dark. I don't know. Yeah, good dive. Yeah, I'm a good swimmer, guys. I dive. I've been swimming for years. I'm a pretty good swimmer, man. And I love the water, the water. And I hope you guys enjoyed the water of knowledge, that pure water, that mem sauce. Shout out to Joseph the Real. Yo, shout out to Science for my music producers, all Make 12, all my music producers, man. No letter J. Yeah, enjoy, enjoy. I'm gonna swim a little bit more. All right, not with you guys, but I'm gonna swim a little bit more, do a little cardio work because it's hot. You know, I'm gonna refresh and mic muted. Damn, the mic's muted. My fault. How's the mic muted? Damn, the mic's muted for real, huh? The mic's muted for real. Jamaica, yeah, yo, much love and respect. I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. Can you guys hear me? All right, all good, all good. All right, yo, I hope you enjoyed the reading. All right. I just wanted to do that, guys. You know, I be feeling obligated. Like I can't just vacation. I gotta work. I gotta keep the knowledge going, man. You know, that's why I brought the book. All right. We gotta do this, even if we're in Jamaica, in holiday or vacation or whatever. So, by the way, guys, I think it's Jamaican Independence Day tomorrow or something like that. So we're gonna be repping Jamaica tomorrow, right? Continue, check out my blogs. I've been doing the travel blogs. I've been showing you what I've been doing this whole time. If you haven't watched something, I don't know where you've been, man. I don't know where you've been. Okay, so check them out, man. I appreciate you guys tuning in today to the reading. Uh, hey, yeah, what's up, Tosh? Yeah, we fish, man. We natural to the water, man. We good, we good. Make your visit Blue Lagoon. Yeah, I'm going to Blue Lagoon, man. I'm going to Blue Lagoon too. Um, Hold on, man. You guys seem like you want to talk a little bit. We're going to Blue Lagoon. We're going to Port Antonio, and hopefully I meet up with Alex, my tall priest brother from Instagram. He said he's gonna do the blessings on me, the indigenous, traditional blessings in Blue Lagoon. That's gonna be powerful right there. And Hawa willing, make sure Hawa's okay with that. As long as Hawa's okay with that, it's gonna happen. If Hawa's not okay with that, then it's not gonna happen. All right. All right. But I appreciate you guys. I'm gonna keep swimming a little bit. Then I'm gonna go have dinner, which I'm probably gonna blog for my blogs. Right. I'm gonna show you what I'm eating. Yeah. Yeah, that was good, man. I gotta keep swimming. Oh, I feel good, so refreshed. I was so hot reading, man. I was like, this is a pretty long chapter. Yeah, Jamaica. That's what we gotta do. That's what we gotta do in Jamaica, man. Much love and respect. Cheers. Look, cheers. Hold on. Don't ask me what I'm drinking, guys. Yo, Tosh. Yo, connect with me, man. Bro, come on, man. That would be like a blessing, man. That would be a blessing, brother. All right, that would be a blessing for real. I'm not kidding, man. Like that's how I would feel. That's how I see it. That would be a blessing, man, to me, and an honor, man, for real. Okay, Tawada, man, Tawada to you. And sorry, Israelite, if I came a little strong. I just want, I'm passionate about this. I know you've been a long time follower. I'm gonna add some moderators today, guys. When I'm done, I'm gonna look back at the live chat and I'm gonna try to add some moderators. I got you touched for sure. Like I'm gonna add some moderators today, okay? As due time. I know a lot of you's been following for a while. I need to add some more moderators, okay? Check out the Patreon page if you want to support. Um, channel membership, you know, and thanks for everything, guys. Like, thanks for everything, man. I hope again you're enjoying the blogs. I am a little crazy in the blogs, it's me out of out of the info. It's just me like being myself, That's who I am. Like when you see me in the blogs, that's kind of who I am in reality, like all day, every day. And again, shout out to D who came to visit me, man. That was so ill, man. Like shout out to D who came to visit me, man. Like man, he's like, oh, you don't know the impact you're having here in Jamaica. I'm like, damn. Well, thanks for letting me know, man. You know. Yeah, I see you guys. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Oh, wow.